The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette. Put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
This is News Talk.
Hello there, you welcome along. So busy show, I think we can say this evening. Niamh Briggs, Grand Slam winner, Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent along on Wednesday Night Rugby. We will talk to David Sneyd on Republic of Ireland. I think Callum Robinson has fairly set the news agenda around the team this afternoon. Azerbaijan looming on Saturday. To that end, by the way, Professor Christine Losher of DCU will be on the show as well. We will talk to Rob Harris from Associated Press after 9:30 in the main about Arsene Wenger's FIFA World Cup every 2 years idea. Certainly seems there's now a very decent chance it's going to happen, actually. Rob is all over that story. 53106, the text number. We're at Off the Ball on Twitter. As always, Richie McCormack is here. Hello.
Young Joe, how are you?
Very well, and not as always, but very welcome nonetheless. Tommy Rooney joins us on a Newsround. Hello.
Afternoon, Joe. Hi, Richie.
Great to have you on. A lot of excitement in the building. Tommy Rooney on the Newsround here.
It's a big day for me, Joe.
Listen,
very excited to get the call up.
Bit of history. A few things going on in your world. I should mention Fergal Logan was on AM this morning. We're going to play some of that after 8:30 this evening, hear what he was saying to you guys. And I know he was on talking obviously about All Ireland's success, but certainly the championship structure, and we are 2 weeks away from Special Congress, was very much on the agenda with him, and you guys have been doing a lot of pieces on this. Really, we're talking, Tommy, for anyone who just hates all this stuff and is not into championship structures whatsoever, this is a big deal. This is very real. We're talking vote on 3 options, and I suppose the 4th option is to change nothing. What in the main are people saying to OTB AM the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, Joe, it's for people who hate this sort of stuff, I would just implore them to tune in over the next 2 weeks and just get involved, because it is a massive decision in the future of Gaelic football. We've kind of been talking about this stuff for nearly a decade now, and it probably does get on people's nerves a wee bit. But what we have at the minute is we've got 3 options. We've got Proposal A, which for a lot of people is a non-runner. It's basically just shifting around the provinces a wee bit and pretty much staying with what we have. We've got Proposal B, which is, keeping the provincial championships but moving them to the spring, which would be where the league is now, and then creating a league slash kind of incorporating the league into the championship, really. So it takes a little bit of thinking to get your head around Proposal B. It absolutely isn't perfect, but in my opinion, and from talking to quite a lot of players and managers over the last few weeks, people want change, and that is the best option at the minute, because the 3rd option is to stick with the status quo. And essentially, if we were to stick with the status quo, we would be going back to either a pre-2017 setup, which is a knockout championship, or back to the last year, the Super 8. So it's not clear yet what we'd be going back to, but that is the 3 options you've got.
Okay,
pretty much just 2 options, Joe.
Yeah,
it's change or go back to the status quo.
Okay, so excuse me, because I said 4th option was to do nothing. So the 3rd option is to do nothing. So it's one of those 3. Is there an early favourite? What are people saying is most likely? Congress can be a curious beast when it comes to predicting what they're going to vote.
That's the thing. It's hard for me to tell you where I think it's going to go at the minute. I've kind of been moving in between it over the last couple of weeks. I would have been fairly confident maybe 2 months ago that we're going to get change and changes on the horizon. And as you speak to people, you learn that there are worries. Colin Collins was very good in the Examiner a couple of weeks ago, speaking about people operating in the background to... He so much as went to say that they're nearly undermining the chance to bring change about it at the minute. We've had Podge Collins on the show. We've had Tony McEntee on the show. We've had Conor O'Donoghue on the show, who a lot of people might not know by name, but he's a Meath man. He's been involved with squads and at county level in Meath, and he's involved in the Football Review Committee, the task force, which was set up to come up with the ideas here. So Conor joined us on the show a couple of weeks ago. It was brilliant. And in my opinion, allayed a lot of the fears that may have been out there around, say, finances, which is what we heard when Brian McAvoy joined us on the show on Tuesday. Brian McAvoy is one of the 4 provincial secretaries in the country. You've won in Ulster, one in Connacht, John Prenty. You've won in Munster and Kieran Leddy, and one in Leinster and Michael Reynolds. And these lads hold a lot of power, and they hold a lot of sway with, we'll say, the people who are going to be placing the votes on the 23rd of October. So, I've been ringing around with Owen Sheehan over the last wee while. We're working on a piece where we're trying to paint a picture of what every county in the country is feeling at the minute. So we're speaking to players from each county and county board officials, and we're building that together at the minute. And some counties are all on the same page, and other counties, I put it this way, the players all want change, is what we're hearing. Some counties are on the fence at the minute.
Yes. And is it falling down maybe around geography? I would fully understand it if you were talking to Ulster people, for instance, who said, well, we have a very vibrant championship, we don't want to lose all that history, we want to keep the provincial championships, for instance. Are you getting some of that kind of feedback?
That's certainly what we've seen in some very strong personalities in Ulster. Naturally, Jim McGuinness has come out and we've all read his columns. He's been very strong and he's argued his point quite well.
Yeah.
Brian McAvoy's been on and was very belligerent and steadfast in his views that he didn't want change coming. There's two strong Ulster voices. They're two of the strongest opponents to change that we've heard so far. Tomorrow morning, the GPA have a lunch. I know Nathan is planning to speak to Tom Parsons, and we're hearing that there'll be a high-profile Tyrone player speaking out in favour of change tomorrow. So that'd be great to hear. That'd be great to see. That's now an All-Ireland winner who is probably looking at the status quo and saying, do you know what, if we want to do back-to-back, it's so much harder for us to get through Ulster than it is for the likes of Dublin and Kerry to walk their way through Munster and Leinster. It's a lopsided competition. It doesn't work. Everyone knows it. Everyone's sick of hearing about it. If we just bring in Proposal B for 3 years, we'll have a bit of change. We can tweak it. The power and the allure of the provincials, we may just learn that there is life beyond it, and the provincials will learn the money hasn't gone away. There's still going to be money there for coaching, for all those jobs. They'll just be slightly different. That's all. Yeah.
And is option B very much the choice of the GPA?
That's what the Players Association is backing. That is what that's seemingly what we're hearing. They're coming out in strong favour of it. I don't know if the numbers were. I heard the numbers were in and around 78%. In terms of the players voted. That's sort of in and around. That's fairly comprehensive in terms of what they want at the minute.
Richie,
now, there are players, Joe, naturally that don't.
Like, of course, yeah.
You know,
Richie, going to be fun and games when Congress come out with a resounding vote for option 3.
Yeah, that's my fear. And I don't think I'm alone in this. And Tommy would obviously have the legwork done to back this up. I think there is a growing sense that the status quo is what we're going to end up with at this special Congress, because we need 60% of delegates to vote for one option or the other. There's already strong opposition from Ulster, as I said last night. Like, it's the one successful shop in a failing shopping centre, and you're asking the shopping centre to close, move down the road, and that one shop is saying, no, we're doing all right here, why should we move? It's a very difficult thing to try and convince them, because there's no arguing against the success of their championship, but everything else has just collapsed. You just have to look at the winning margins in Connacht, is the standout, I guess, over the past 3-4 years, and it's a non-entity. There's no there's a nice frisson between Galway and Mayo playing each other, and maybe sometimes Roscommon getting thrown into the mix, but there's no sense that you're achieving anything by winning Connacht. Similarly, in Leinster, obviously that's become a one-horse race. There's obviously the growing sense that there's other teams closing the gap on Dublin. But the overall football championship as it stands is not a viable option for continuation. And that's where the problem is going to arise, because clearly the players want change, and the players are, I think, in an overwhelming majority, as Tommy mentioned, they're heading towards option B. But they're drawing a line in the sand as well, saying that the status quo is just not an option. So the question is, what does happen beyond the 23rd when this special Congress happens? And there is a decent chance that we do end up having to stick with the status quo, and the players are just saying no. They just don't want this. They don't. Yeah. What does that do for it? What does that do for a championship when you know that the players involved in it have zero faith in it?
For making calls today, Joe, I don't think this is a done deal in any way yet. I know that a lot of counties are sitting down with their football committees next week to have a chat about it and to decide what way they're going to vote. So I'm hoping that the more conversations that are had about this, and Brian McAvoy has questions about the finances, so it'd be amazing to see a bit of leadership coming out, and somebody coming out and saying, do you know what, we've done the maths, we've clocked it up, you're not going to lose any money.
Yeah,
there's nothing to worry about here. There's going to be 126 quality games next year if we get it. There's no World Cup next year. There's nothing happening in the summer. Gaelic football could be incredible next year.
And on Croke Park and GAA headquarters, are they advocating one option in particular? Have they come out and run a campaign?
There's been very little from Croke Park so far on the record publicly in the last wee while.
Right.
I do know that the previous president of the association, John Horan, is very much in favour of change. He's on the record for saying that before. We haven't heard from him in the last wee while. It'd be nice if he came out and said something possibly. We haven't heard from Larry McCarthy in the last couple of weeks on the record, but we do know that when he was going for presidency, he said that he was in favour of change. Larry McCarthy, if you're listening, you're welcome on the show whenever you want.
Yeah, and we don't.
I just think that's important, Joe. I do think it's important to see the leadership.
It's very significant to actually get a feel for what headquarters are advocating. No, if we're going to have the GPA and you're talking to various people, but I'm sure lots would look towards Croke Park for some guidance on this. What do Croke Park advocate? So it's interesting. They're not taking a position on this necessarily thus far, anyway.
Yeah, so far, and I wonder will that change in the next week? Because as I said, next week a lot of committees are meeting. They're going to have their meetings. They're going to come out and they're going to decide then. So, and then as a lot of people know, Congress, as you mentioned, is a funny thing, Joe. Sometimes the decisions are made 10 minutes before the votes go in. There is no transparency. They do not have to show what they voted for. Like the GPA tried to bring in a mandate that there had to be transparency around what you voted for at Congress. So it's a weird democracy.
Yeah. Let's get going with the news round then. It is, as ever, with thanks to Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. And Richie, needless to say, like pretty much every back page and a few front pages this morning, Callum Robinson dominates.
Yeah, the Republic of Ireland manager Stephen Kenny says Callum Robinson is not alone in refusing the COVID-19 vaccine. The West Brom striker confirmed his stance yesterday despite twice contracting the virus and missing 8 out of the last 13 internationals for virus-related reasons. Kenny says the number with a similar view in his squad at the moment is likely in the single figures. Let's first hear what Robinson had to say yesterday about his particular stance.
My honest opinion would be it's your choice. Like, I wouldn't be to say everyone should be vaccinated or you shouldn't get vaccinated. I think it's your personal choice. If you want to be vaccinated, then go do it. But if you don't want to, it is what it is. It's everyone's choice. I can't tell people to get it and I can't tell people not to.
What's your personal choice, Connor? Have you decided to get vaccinated?
I haven't been vaccinated yet, no. So that's my choice at this moment in time.
Some people might think that's unusual given your own personal health experiences recently. Yeah, of course. As I said, it's obviously annoying that I've caught it twice, but I haven't been vaccinated. Further down the line, I could change my mind and want to do it, but at this moment in time, I haven't been vaccinated, no.
Yeah, we'll play you a different clip maybe at 7:30 as well, because we're going to come back to this, because he is asked for his reasons, actually, which I suppose in some ways is the most interesting aspect, and didn't really, I would say, Rich, have one. It was more a case of just haven't really done it. He didn't elaborate on that in any great way.
That's, I think, what people would appreciate as they try to understand this particular stance, is that if you are going to cross that bridge, and let's be honest, there is an element of bravery in what Robinson has done, because there's not many people around him who've not taken the vaccine in terms of professional football and held their hands up and admitted it, and at least he has done that. The problem is like there's no, and there was no yesterday in his addressing it, there was no explanation as to why he has come to this stance. It's just a lot of, it's my personal choice, and it's, you can't make everybody do it. He's not alone, as I said. Stephen Kenny's mentioned that they're in single figures in terms of the amount of players in his squad at the moment who don't have the vaccine either. Like, he just wants to hear an explanation, because like Jurgen, like the Jurgen Klopp speech from last week comes up a lot, and there's a lot of truth in it. But the one kernel that stands out is that if he has any doubt or wants to know about anything, or in that sphere, or in an area he doesn't understand, he asks a specialist. And anything like this, you talk to a doctor. Like, I spoke to Darragh O'Shea. Darragh O'Shea plays obviously for the same club that Callum Robinson does on the show not long, unfortunately, before he broke his leg. But I asked him at the time, because Robinson had clearly missed out that game in Portugal, like, what's the stance at West Brom? Are you told by doctors? And, is there any medical advice from the club on high? And he says there is, and as people have come in and explained it. And I think O'Shea hinted at the fact that he'd been vaccinated. I don't want to put words into his mouth, but I fairly strongly got the suggestion that he was vaccinated. Whereas obviously we had the suspicions that Robinson wasn't, and we found that out to a fact yesterday. But you don't get any logical response back. Like, you're given reasons, and you're given suggestions, and you're given assurances by doctors that this thing is safe, and the reasons for not taking it don't come back as being holding even as much or any water at all.
Like, I'm sure of those not taking a vaccine, there's a spectrum, right from reading heavily about it every single night, total obsession about it, all the way down to just not that engaged, not that bothered. I would have said, just based on how he phrased it and his tone of voice and the lack of any kind of explanation. Robinson was more towards the not overly engaged with the topic. It was, I may get round to it, but no, I'm not. It's personal choice and no real strong stance or rationale given. So that's where he seemed to be coming from. He said he has had COVID twice, obviously, and was much sicker the second time. You kind of wonder, is he worried about a third time, potentially? Stephen Kenny was talking afterwards, though. We should play some of that.
Yeah, obviously Kenny addressed the matter. Under 21 manager Jim Crawford, just for a bit of context, has been forced to name 2 squads for upcoming Euro qualifiers with Luxembourg and Montenegro. Travel restrictions between the former Yugoslav nation and the UK and Germany saw Crawford add 13 homegrown players to his panel, and Kenny was asked if he'll have to alter his squad selection in future based on vaccine status.
Well, I think it'd be quite a radical viewpoint to just say, right, whoever's not vaccinated has not been selected in the future. You know, I'm not aware of anyone who's done that in any sport at the moment. So for me to just come and decide that would be extremely radical. And I think the fact that Montenegro are on the UK's red list is, I suppose, something we can't get around at the moment. You know, that's something that we can't get around, and that's a very difficult situation for Jim Crawford and his team and the under 21s, and that's a very difficult situation. But I think it's I think for the individual association to just come together and say we're not selecting anyone who hasn't got it would create as many problems, would create problems we don't need to have for ourselves.
Yeah, not least if, Tommy, I suppose up to 7, 8, 9, who knows how many players aren't vaccinated. What do you make of this whole situation? It's obviously, with Robinson, we can't really speculate as to why he is or isn't, because he just didn't elaborate. I mean, we'll talk in a few moments' time to a Professor Christine Losher, but doing a bit of reading about what's going on even over in English dressing rooms. Like, it's no surprise this is in the Irish camp, because this is it seems to be a phenomenon in English dressing rooms at the moment, and so Irish players are over there. Certain pockets are unbelievably compliant. You have Wolves at 100%, you have Leeds at 99%, Jurgen Klopp said Liverpool 99%, and then elsewhere it seems that 7 of the 20 Premier League clubs have less than 50%. I was reading one quote from a club doctor talking to the Daily Mail, and again, this isn't necessarily Callum Robinson at all, I don't know where he's coming from, but doctor was talking generally and said it's very frustrating and hard to know what to do at the moment, as the conspiracy theories have really taken hold in some dressing rooms. We've got senior players, intelligent men, coming out with all sorts of nonsense, and they won't be budged. One of them told me he didn't need the vaccine because he could boost his immunity by taking vitamins. Some of the stuff they're reading and believing on the internet's incredible. Players are saying it will make them infertile, that it's part of a plot involving Bill Gates. The pandemic just propaganda. The real problem is that they're also polluting the minds of younger players. That's the end of the quote. And Stephen Kenny did mention some players, or some, well, I don't know if he was even talking about his own players, but some players either in Ireland camp or beyond have heard myths and are worried about virility and various issues like that. So it does seem to be a phenomenon that's really taken hold in football dressing rooms over in England.
Yeah, and it's strange hearing that there's such a difference in squads as well. Like, you'd love to find out how the likes of Liverpool and Leeds and Wolves have got such good compliancy, and yet in the likes of Manchester United, I think it's, I don't know if it's in around 50%, but it's not the lowest, but they're in and around the middle. So, like, for Stephen Kenny, it's incredible. Like, every international window there seems to be some sort of, like, you would call it the COVID misfortune, but like it's happening time and time again. So when you look at the IRFU around the corner, and they seem to have, I know that's your next story, Richie, such a high compliancy rate, you'd wonder, can the FEI learn anything from there and just try and get those numbers up a bit more, because 8 or 9 players in a squad is still quite a high number. Yeah, I would feel.
Yeah, it does sound, I mean, I think you raise a very interesting point, Tommy, which is so many dressing rooms have, say, 99% compliancy, IRFU 99% compliancy, and then when you're reading like that club doctor quote, it does seem, Rich, as if maybe the dynamics in certain dressing rooms are a couple of the influential senior members start reading a few things, start putting a few ideas out there, and then there is the herd that follow, and maybe a bunch just feel, well, geez, I'm hearing something from that player I admire and trust that makes me think twice. I just won't take the risk, and that's presumably how it takes hold. And it seems even club doctors aren't able to persuade senior players to budge. That's the scary thing, really. The great irony is that these players trust club doctors implicitly with their body otherwise, and like take injections and tablets probably all the time because the club doctor gave them to them without much questioning.
Yeah, and it's not just a football related skepticism, let's say. The amount, like we put up the story last night, 11 o'clock is when the embargo was lifted on it, and like immediately the amount of responses you get saying that like he's practically immune against it because he's gotten it twice and he's got the antibodies in the system to handle it now. You see other people saying, sure, the vaccine only stops you from getting really sick, which isn't true at all. And like basically there's perpetuated myths online by a very vocal and very entrenched group of people that are like, I would love to understand why they feel like everybody wants to have a team, it seems, in whatever aspect it is in life, whether it's, you know, you support your club or whether you're a supporter of a particular political party or you're a supporter of how this like pandemic is handled. But you can't lose sight of the fact that this is something that has killed hundreds of thousands of people, that led to the world effectively being shut down for more or less a year, and beyond. Then obviously we've had our own struggle. So you would just have to point yourself in the direction of doctors and just ask questions as to why this is happening, and take their assurances as being ultra qualified, not somebody from like scienceskeptic.org or whatever websites people are citing as reasons not to take a vaccine. It's just very confusing and very worrying that enough people can be hoodwinked. What I would say about the Ireland squad and about Kenny's quote there is that he could find himself in a little bit of an issue should like actually we be drawn against a team that's on the UK travel list, a red travel list in future, because there are the likes of Montenegro, as you mentioned there. Georgia is another one who you could end up facing in the Nations League, and suddenly you're without half of your players because they're being forced to isolate upon their return. Now the UK government have essentially tried to incentivize getting vaccinated because they're going to ease restrictions for people coming back from red list countries if they're vaccinated, fully vaccinated. And if you're not vaccinated, you're still going to have to do your 10-day period basically locked away in a hotel. And we've seen the ructions that happen with Brazil and Argentina over the course of the last month. Mm-hmm. We've seen Jim Crawford have to name a shadow squad now because he's gone to Montenegro. And the same thing will happen to Stephen Kenny if he finds he suddenly can't count on those 7, 8, 9 players, and however many it is, who aren't vaccinated, if we have to go to a Georgia or a Montenegro in the next year or so.
Yeah. Where are you going next?
I mentioned the IRFU there. Tommy did a least as well. They say the vaccine uptake has been 99.2% across professional rugby. They were responding to inquiries from the Irish Independent today. That number, according to the IRFU, takes into account a small number of people still waiting for a second jab. While Newcastle's Saudi Arabian-backed takeover has been boosted with a TV piracy dispute with beIN Sports being resolved, it means the Premier League and European matches can now be broadcast legally in Qatar again after a 4-year ban on the media-based company was lifted. The issue was a key part of a failed £300 million takeover of Newcastle. An arbitration hearing between Newcastle and the Premier League regarding the takeover takes place in January. So it's not going to be humanitarian issues. It's not going to be links to the Saudi royal family. It's a piracy issue that's going to get this over the line.
Yeah, and it was always the case, really. That was what halted it more than anything. So now that that's sorted, I think it's green lights all the way. Don't suspect Newcastle fans will be too upset. They've had a fairly miserable couple of years. Barcelona, meanwhile, just at the beginning, Rich, of their miserable few years. Yeah,
it seems so. Poor transfers, soaring wages and increased administrative expenses are among the reasons for Barcelona's dire financial situation. An audit has found the Catalan Giants were technically bankrupt when President Joan Laporta took over in March of last year. The club were unable to offer star players like Lionel Messi a new contract in the summer, with the new board finding debts and future liabilities of €1.35 billion.
Tommy, I'm still getting used to watching Barcelona get the snot kicked out of them in Champions League matches.
Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it? It's so weird to watch. And you're nearly expecting them to get hammered. Like I fully expected Benfica to beat them the last day. They got a good trimming off Bayern the first day around. It's all falling apart, and it's not nice to watch.
No, I mean, a party is not too upset for the idiots that caused the mess, but in terms of like the institution and the great football it played and what a great part of the scene they were. I mean, Champions League is definitely a less exciting place without them.
Yeah, it was just magic there for 7 years, and it's funny, like you don't really hear anything anymore about La Masia or
No.
refrain the academy or anything like that anymore. It's just like they took their eye off the ball completely. And I suppose that happens at times. These things happen in cycles, and a great team comes along, and if it's not managed properly, it can slip away very dramatically.
I tell you what, though, Simon Cooper's book, Barca, has come along at just like the perfect time. Like literally, the entire foundation started crumbling, and he pressed release on that book. I read it there a couple of months ago, and it gives a brilliant insight into the failings of La Masia over the last few years, and essentially how they just squandered money that they were swimming in a while ago, and now they haven't got a pot to pee in because they've just been idiots in terms of their cash and how they kowtowed, especially to Messi. He was the be all and end all of that club, and they just lent so heavily on him in every respect. It's a brilliant. If you haven't read it yet, I fully recommend that book.
No, I keep meaning to. And is it Cooper sense that La Masia won't produce more brilliant players?
It's not that they won't, but they will produce them in fewer numbers, just because of there is like a tidal aspect to this, like in that you can't keep producing so many people for such a prolonged period of time, and they did have a freakishly fecund period whereby so many players came through, and that can't last. But you add that to the mismanagement of the club and the fact that people have taken their eye off the ball, that they mightn't have necessarily the right person in charge of it in Patrick Kluivert at the moment. Like it's a storm of so many different kind of areas making, and it's all raining down on them in one big fell swoop now. And that's why you have a front line of Luke de Jong and Martin Brathwaite playing for what is essentially the biggest club, or one of the biggest clubs in the world. Like it's just, it's lunacy, absolute lunacy. And like I say, like Cooper's book goes into it in far better detail than I could in 20 seconds on the radio on a Wednesday night. But it's a shambles, and it's been of their own making. And that's, but you can't really take any pleasure in it, because it's such a pillar of football for pretty much everyone's lives that be listening to this show, going back to '92 and their Champions League win at Wembley. Like, it's difficult to see a club of this stature with so much history behind them doing so badly.
Peter G, if you live in a bubble of millionaire footballers who have no need to engage in the real world to any real extent, I'd imagine it's quite easy to fall into a state of complacency / apathy towards it. Yeah, I guess that's true in many instances, although you do think in Robinson's case, given he was sick twice, that I don't know how much complacency or apathy you could have towards it. Again, he didn't elaborate in his own personal reasons, really. What are the folks who would retain option 3 voting for? The same drudgery we've had across the early rounds of the Championship? Have they come up with a better option than proposals A or B? If either of those plans are so off beam, wonders Cormac. I mean, look, I don't love A on the face of it, Tommy. B seems like the best of the bunch. I mean, anyone voting for C, you have to wonder what it is they've loved about the Championship in recent years.
That's the thing. I can't really get my head around it, why you'd stick with what we have. It's clearly broken. It's not working. And while proposal B is not perfect, the players want it. They want change. Managers want change. It's going to end up being better for the GAA in the long run. It's going to make a far more valuable competition in all ways.
Yeah.
Like, so.
There was a key part in what you said, Tommy, there as well. Is like, just give it a go for 3 years. Like see how it pans out. Like, I don't think, if the numbers stack up, as I'm sure people who'd be more knowledgeable about the situation would know, if they do stack up, then why wouldn't you give it something that could be beneficial to the world for 3 years? And if it doesn't work out, you know what, there's always the fallback option to go with.
Rich, before you go, the big news, of course, Bryson versus Brooks officially on.
Oh, we saw this coming against a mile off. But yes, indeed, Bryson DeChambeau and Brooks Koepka will go head-to-head in what is apparently the 5th edition of The Match. The challenge event will see the players face off in a 12-hole contest at Wynn Golf Course in Las Vegas in November, in around Thanksgiving. DeChambeau and Koepka put their rivalries aside, of course, to help Team USA secure a record-breaking win over Europe in the Ryder Cup last month. I'm sure you'll be shelling out your pay-per-view money for this, Joe.
That is truly depressing. Is anyone going to watch that?
Yes. Golf nerds.
I wouldn't.
I thought you were going to have a watch-along on the pod, no, Joe?
Oh, my God, no. I mean, if we get desperate for content, come back to me in a couple of weeks' time. I'll be selling it big time.
November, you might be, yeah.
Yeah. No. This is very grim. I'd be surprised if anyone's watching this. Last one, Tommy, somebody's just asking, what has been the strongest argument against B? Which is a good question.
Strong. I'm trying to just picture Brian McAvoy's words here, and he was very, very strong in putting it across the last day. They seem convinced that they're going to lose money next year. Right. That they don't, like the opposition do. They don't want to split up Losing the link between the provincial and the All-Ireland Championship seems to be the real problem. Now, there is still a connection there. The provincials will still have their own place in the calendar. There'll still be a bit of a steam to go with it.
Do you think so, though? I sort of see B as realistically the provincials very quickly withering on the vine a touch and almost pre-season vibes and teams not playing their best players necessarily, and just a tune-up for the busy summer ahead. I think if we're being realistic, I think that's where provincials will go. Maybe not in Ulster, but otherwise pretty much.
But I think the provincials are kind of there anyway. And in a sense, Joe, if you think of the league, like the leagues are played in January, February, March. The weather's brutal. Teams have to put out players and find out who new players are and learn about them. And the leagues are some of the best football that we see all year long. It's just at the wrong time of the year. So I still think we're going to get good football. People will want to go see it. And like one of the biggest things that might come out of Proposal B is that you'll actually get fan bases going to games. You know, I'm like speaking to a footballer today from Roscommon. He was like, every time our league fixtures come out, my family are asking and my friends are asking, who are you playing away? Because we'll go down for the weekend, we'll make a big thing of it.
Yeah.
There could be a huge thing for the GAA here. They could really take over as the number one sport, Gaelic football in the country. And don't forget that the GAA are coming out of the pandemic as well. They need to make money over the next decade. They need to make up for some of the lost revenue. This could be a viable way out of that. So we'll wait and see what's happening. Can I give one plug, Joe, as a good salesman for a non-GAA Congress podcast that we've got in the mix this week?
Yeah, please.
The Football Pod of Paddy and Andy. You probably thought I was going to mention it. We've got Conor McKenna on this week, Tyrone All-Ireland winner. Came back from the AFL to win an All-Ireland for Tyrone. Really, really interesting guy. We all came off the back of the chat with Conor McKenna and we were like, who did you remind you of? Dear McConnelly. So really interesting the way he talks about training less and not seeing GAA as being number one in his life. Interesting in the way that he didn't want to be a Gaelic footballer when he was a kid. He didn't want to be a soccer player. He wanted to be a jockey, and he had to give up on that dream when he was 14 or 15. He probably would have been the biggest jockey we've ever seen. Yeah. And really good stuff about how Tyrone changed that from Mickey Hart as well. So it's an interesting listen.
Okay, very good. We're going to play that out, I think, pretty much in full on Sunday as well. So people will catch it one way or another. Tommy Rooney, thank you.
Thanks, lads, for having me.
Richie, cheers for that.
Nice, lads.
Richie McCormack there. We'll take a short break. Back in 1 sec.
The News Round on Off the Ball.
With Gillette. Put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.